Hi, welcome to the Danbury Podcast, where turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. In this podcast, I'll bring you resources, tips, interviews, and lots more to help to grow your business and make it less dependent on you. Welcome to the Danbury Podcast. I'm Dan Bradbury.
And I'm not. I'm Topher Morrison. Guest co-hosting, I think, is the unofficial official title. Someday we'll probably talk about why I'm here. But anyway. Or not, maybe. Yeah, who knows. I know you've got a very special guest today, and I'm going to try not to be heard about this. It's not me. So, we're going to get to this as quickly as we can. But what is going on with news in entrepreneurship, specifically around the area of marketing?
In the news this week, a great new study has come out that shows that 86% of B2B businesses are finding success with influencer marketing.
That makes me cringe.
Why does that make you cringe?
I've got a problem with influencer marketing. I just think that, and believe me, I've been told I'm wrong on this, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, but I just can't get into thinking that hiring somebody who does stupid TikTok videos is going to somehow get me business. Now, granted, I know there are some products that would make a big difference for. I was talking to a fashion designer the other day, and he said he almost buys nothing exclusively off of TikTok. I don't think we need your input on this podcast. You've already butted in on one of them. That would be my dog, Macy, for those of you listening in.
Hey, Macy.
Go lay down. All right. So I just have a hard time with that. So I guess, yes, some businesses lie to it. But then again, you could also argue that influencing marketing has been around forever.
No, yeah, I was going to say, let me tell you what this makes me think of. It makes me think of two things. It's, number one, marketing is always changing, right? So I get the resistance because it doesn't feel good to me either because, you know, we already established businesses. You get to like what you know. And then when things change, there's kind of a resistance to change. But if you don't change, you'll get left behind. However, underlying all this is my friend Jay Abraham, who was a previous guest on this podcast.
Yes. I would call him an influencer, by the way. He adds value. He does something. He has actually good opinions to say. Somebody doing that, I just don't think that's influential.
Right. But what
I'm clearly an old man.
Well, the point with the Jay is that there are marketing fundamentals. Right? There are marketing fundamentals that do not change. However, the mediums and the platforms in which they apply, or how those principles applied, do change over time. So I think, you know, the theme, and it speaks to our special guest that's coming up here shortly. It's how do you apply these principles using the new technology, using the new platforms to make sure that your business is getting in front of the audience it needs to. And if your audience moves, your marketing message needs to move.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, the argument there would be, regardless of what I think is influential, it's if my customers think that they're influential, right? So if my customers are moved and influenced by somebody who puts Mentos in a Coke can and squirts it all over their face, fine.
I feel like you're struggling with this TikTok thing.
Oh, I am. Yeah, I honestly, man, I really struggle with TikTok. I hate TikTok.
This is a great tee-up for our next segment because I don't think it's necessarily just the medium. It's also what's topical, like what's, I don't want to say on vogue, but what's dominant in the culture, what's kind of present top of mind at the moment, which teases up nicely.
You showed me your card. You said this tees up nicely. Please, God, let me say, fail of the week is related to TikTok. I'm going to pray for it. What's the fail of the week?
It's actually not. TikTok came second in my list when I was preparing. The fail of the week is actually also weirdly a success. Mm-hmm. But let me explain why. It's the Spanish Equalities Ministry. Now, that sounds like, what the hell is this? So the Spanish Equalities Ministry was putting out an ad. It was putting out an ad, so this is effectively the Spanish government saying that all bodies are all bikini bodies are ready. I've got that term right? So
Wait. This is the Spanish what?
Equalities Ministry. So it's basically the subsidiary of the Spanish government that's for promoting equality. So the actual ad itself is of individuals. I think they were all women, but of diverse body shapes, backgrounds, etc. So at first, the ad was super praised because they're effectively saying, okay, they're trying to shun we got
all
supermodels.
Bodies are bikini bodies.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. So they got people. One lady had a mastectomy, I think. one lady had a prosthetic limb, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So like it would
I praise that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I mean by like the culture, the consciousness about promoting diversity and equality is like, it's great. So in a sense, that was a success. But do you know what the fail was?
I was going to say, it offended some group. I'm not sure which one. Yeah.
What
was
it actually offended the models in the photograph because they didn't ask permission. So the department that created the poster was trying to get it out at speed, and they literally just took photos from Instagram pages. and so the lady who had the prosthetic limb, it was airbrushed out. It wasn't shown, right?
Her limb?
Correct. The prosthetic limb wasn't shown, right? So she was saying it was rude, it was disrespectful, they didn't ask permission, right? And
it is rude and it is disrespectful.
And they just took it, and then it's on a national campaign.
Holy hell.
So on the one hand, so it's a win-loss-win. The win was great, promoting diversity, a worthy, important thing, right? Great, bringing it to the forefront of the mind. The loss is it completely screwed up and antagonized people, and they're getting sued and are going to have to pay compensation out. Like,
we have to put the link to this story in the show notes. 100%. For sure.
So like ask for permission. But then the win is because of this first model complained, well, they were the model, they just didn't know they were going to be the model, right? But then another person came in and said, hey, that's my photo. So it seems like somebody who put the posters together just went, let's go and find people of different shapes and sizes. And this is the Spanish government.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty damn good fail of the week.
There you go.
All right.
Ask permission. Ask permission from the people that you involve in your marketing.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, well, then let's get to the hero of the week, which is the special guest that I have to be bumped for. I can't even act offended by that because you got a great guest. So your guest is, you had an opportunity to sit down with him earlier via Zoom to interview him because he's out in, I think he's Los Angeles. Am I right?
I can't remember, but I do think he's somewhere on the West Coast, yeah. His name's Scott Oldford. Scott, he's the author of The Nuclear Effect, which is all about scaling a 7-figure e-commerce business. But really, this guy is an absolute genius in all things marketing. He's got, if you studied him, he's prolific on content, real high-value content producer, and just a really fun guy. All
right. So with that, let's see the interview with Dan and Scott.
Let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about positioning. Let's talk about, I'd love a conversation about how you see marketing's changed. What's changed in the time that we've known each other? And what remains constant? What remains true?
I think because authenticity and realness and integrity is becoming more and more of the focal point just as a culture, I think a lot of the tactical stuff is finally catching up with marketers where, even a couple of years ago, you could run an evergreen webinar and 80% of the audience wouldn't know the difference. As long as you were outside of the internet marketing world, you could run an evergreen webinar. And I've been anti-evergreen webinars, the ones that were like, countdown. And, I've been anti that since, I think I've always been anti that because I didn't really necessarily think that you should start the conversation off with somebody and lie to them. And it's been not a good, it's like going on a date and lying about who you are from the get-go. You gotta back your way out of that one for the rest of the time. And so I think that a lot of the things that are more reactive marketing or primal marketing or like response, I have a framework called the levels of consciousness for marketing or for business. And a large part of it is marketing and sales. And a large part of it says that, well, as human consciousness on our planet evolves and more people go from primal consciousness to reactive consciousness and more people go from reactive consciousness to willful consciousness and more people go then from willful to intellectual. And I can talk about what that means in a minute. But the more that happens, the more of these sort of just getting that second of attention and then, manipulating pain to get the person to click and then being able to manipulate them further, the less that essentially works. Which is a good thing because you don't want your customers to be those people anyways, or at least I don't. And a lot of people and that's mostly the people I mentor, are the people that mentor and advise and follow my work, are the people that actually want to use authenticity in their marketing and actually be real and actually all these different types of things. And I think that that's stayed the same. I think the thing that has changed the most is attention has gotten very expensive in the last 10 years, particularly the last 5. I think it's going to get more. I think it's going to get far more expensive to get attention. And I'm not just talking about the cost for ads. I'm talking the ability for, in the last 15 years, for our attention span as a human species to go so downward. We've gone on a downward spiral where, if we're not getting some brain chemical every couple of seconds, for most people, unfortunately, you're looking for the next brain chemical and so on and so forth. And so we went from what? We went from websites that got our attention to email that got our attention to banner ads that got our attention to Facebook, which looking now, if you compare it to TikTok or Reels, is slow, right? Because you're like, oh, I know, I need another hit. And so the attention span is what marketers really have always relied on, is being able to capture someone's attention, mediate that attention, keep the attention, and then direct it towards the signal in which they want to.
Right. Well, it's a downward spiral, right? As in the bait.
It's a downward spiral.
The bait and switch becomes bigger because people go, how do we grab the attention? Or it's a more sensationalist marketing. So, well,
it is.
I'm with you. So what's the antidote, right? Because everybody's trying to one up each other and kind of go, okay,
it is.
Be bolder. What are the principles that you believe are going to drive, be sustainable, authentic going forward?
I think what you're seeing right now is what people are trying to do is they're just trying to go like off the deep end of attention. So there's a group of people that are just saying polarizing stuff because they know that the polarizing stuff will get the most amount of clicks and the amount of attention and so on and so forth. And there's some people doing a really good job of that. I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but I'm just saying that that's what people have, done. And so you're going to keep one up because when something's entertaining, I kind of put it this way: is if there's a train off its tracks and it's going, it's hard to look away from the train tracks, even if it's not going to be a good situation. And unfortunately, a lot of marketing has gone that way, where it's just extravagant, it's larger than life, it's not real. I think that stuff's going to eventually have ramifications legally in the next 5 to 10 years.
Let's talk about authenticity, right? Specifically, being seen as an authority. Because for me, when we're being bombarded by all these people making big screams, that the marketplace is moving away from that, going, I don't like it, it seems inauthentic. So they're looking for an authority. And there was a really interesting article or bit of research that just came out this morning, Scott. So I don't know if you've seen it yet, which I found quite interesting. It said 86% of B2B businesses that have tried this approach have had success with it, and that is influencer marketing. And specifically, it was saying, when you read into the research, it was saying that what made it effective was if a business aligned with an influencer because of the specificity of the audience, the relevance, the audience relevance was what made it work. So what is your perspective, thinking from the mind of the business owner trying to position themselves and grow their awareness in the marketplace? What's your opinion on influencer marketing?
I think you got to become your own influencer. Like a lot of the time, you might not be big enough to be able to like pay influencers or whatever it might be. But I think that I think there's a case to say that of all the businesses that I'm both an advisor and investor in, and I mentor, the ones that have the easiest time getting to 10 million a year are the influencer-led business. Okay, so if you got two businesses, one are purely based on services, good product, good operations, delivery. All right, you put that to one side, which are important, of course. And then you put on the other side, and you have somebody that's influencer-led, right? The person that's going to do the stories, the person that's going to be able to be, someone's going to be able to resonate through them. Somebody that when they post something, they feel seen and heard, right? So we live in a world that's, of course, very connected. And we also live in a world that makes it so that people do not feel seen and heard on a daily basis. Like generally, like when I tell people about sales, I'm like, forget everything about sales. The only thing that matters is that person is seen and heard. And if you make that person seen and heard and you have a solution that can actually help them, you're going to be able to make money.
And so this is a really interesting conversation because we've not spoken for a long time, but yeah, I get it spot on. So I'd be curious to know, what do you see as being the transitions, right? In the sense of, if you think that the people listening to this podcast, high 6, low 7-figure revenue, and so often they get to that point one way, but actually there's a shift that's required in order to propel them. As you said, I mean, dollars and pounds, maybe it's slightly different, but it's not going to be radically different. I find it's about the 2 million mark that it's like there's a shift that's required from a marketing position, branding perspective. What do you think those things are? Or a different way said, Scott, is what are the beliefs or misconceptions that a business owner that's trying to break through that threshold, that market or that revenue ceiling, if you like, what mistakes are they making?
Well, first off, I'm just going to tell you, it's a hard transition. It's very difficult. It's incredibly difficult because you got two core avatars. So you only get to 2 to 3 million in generally two scenarios. Either you're really good at marketing and sales, and you've been able to get a lot of momentum very quickly. And at 2 to 3 million, your delivery just completely conks out, right? So you either don't have any, so you either have money and you have a lot of time, or sorry, you have a lot of money but no time, or you're just completely oversubscribed, and now your delivery starts, going down, which then hurts your brand reputation, right? So that's the first thing, and that's actually a majority. Because I'm, somewhat of an influencer in my own world, that's a lot of the people that I attract at that level. And so you have the other opposite. You have the opposite side. So that generally it takes 3 to 5 years for somebody to get to 2 to 3, 4 million based on an influencer brand at the maximum. Okay.
Yeah, because either works and they get traction, or it doesn't. They fall over, right?
Correct. It generally is. Generally, at the end of the day, there's like a 5-year span of time where it either works or it doesn't. There's no like in between, right? And so really, it's based upon if that person can get to 200,000 a year, they can get to $1 million, right? And if you can get to $1 million, you get to 2 million. But the thing is, you can't use the same thing to get from 2 to 5. So we'll come back to that in a second.
That's it.
So then now there's anomalies to that. I'm one of them, but I failed my way forward. We can talk about that, how I failed my way forward on that, because I made all the mistakes and I figured out, oh, that doesn't work, and I've seen it play out. So then you have the second example, and the second example, their marketing and sales probably more based upon referrals and partnerships and organic. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of explosive growth. If there's explosive growth, it's because they aligned with a partner that had a bunch of traffic, right? Or they had, that type of thing. But and this person's probably not an influencer as much. They're more of an operator. They're more of what you would call a real business owner, right? So the influencer is generally going to be more of the creative, more of the entrepreneur. They're not a great investor. They're not a great business owner. They're not a great operator. And so then you have on the other side, which is somebody that can build the operations, procedures, SOPs, can hire team, can manage team. Like they are great at being able to manage a business. But the problem is that most long tail marketing and sales requires investment with a feedback loop that is not doesn't have a definite time. So most business owners, I'll say smart business owners, by the book business owners, are like, okay, well, if I'm going to spend $100,000 on marketing, what's my return?
Right.
And if I can't have a good guarantee on that return, I'm not going to do it.
I won't do it.
So this is the difference. And so this is the difference from the influencer, which doesn't really care because they just know that thing is going to work because they spend all their days on Facebook and ads, or the Facebook and Instagram. They understand what works. They understand that they can get on a call with anybody and close them. They might not be able to fulfill what they just closed, but they can close them on that sale. And so on the opposite side, the operator has a much slower time growing. And at a certain point, the referrals and the partnerships make it so that you either plateau or you start going backwards, even if you have high profitability, even if you have good operations, even if you have good procedures. And at the same time, that threshold is generally 2 to 4 million or so as well.
What I'm loving about this, Scott, and unfortunately we're going to have to do a round 2 because we're about out of time, but what I'm loving about this conversation is we are, in many respects, have got complete opposite approaches. So for example, you said I'm not a numbers guy and I'm a numbers freak, right? But
I know you are, yeah.
But the principles are the same. i.e. taking a long-term view, looking at it like an investor. It's based upon trust. I know we both got private equity groups and we make private equity investments, and that unfortunately have to make it into I hope there's a round 2 for this conversation.
I definitely want to talk about that for sure in a round 2 for sure.
Right. And what I love about this, I want to just ask for any final top tips on where you think the listeners, if they're digging this, where they can find out more. And I think sometimes that avatar that goes, oh, like this feels risky. Well, you gave one example of how you mitigate the risk, but there's also another way that you're already doing. You just didn't articulate. So I want to speak to the listener now, and that's this. I think people go, oh, I don't want to do that because it's scary and new, but they don't realize what it's going to cost them in terms of opportunity cost if they don't explore a new platform. Right? Because all platforms die. They all go through a life cycle. So we're not
everything dies. Everything dies.
So I'm not saying TikTok's going to be the next great platform. Neither are you, but it's a test. But what you do know is whatever platform is working for you right now as you're listening to this, it's going to die. There's nobody sat around going, wow, my Facebook ad costs are really going down over time.
It's never going to happen. And if the only way that happens is if Facebook no longer is a platform that you actually want to be on, and a bunch of other people have a mass exodus of the actual platform. And what I'd say is, the same way that investors want to diversify their income and have multiple, different things that they're into. When you're in a business, you want to do the same thing, right? So you want to have multiple traffic sources. You want to have multiple platforms. Now, you don't get successful generally on multiple platforms. Generally, you get one, you double down on it, you make it work, you take the profit from that, you get to 2, you take the profit from that, you go to 4, and you multiply in that way so that you're mitigating the risk. And then as platforms and ways no longer work, you're like, all right, see you later. And so, the way I always look at this is you got 2 options in life. You got the option to be pushed to do something or to be pulled to do something. And so I always listen to the pull to do something, not the pushed, right? Because if you wait long enough, the universe will push you, right, and then your back is against the wall. It's not a very fun place to be. I've been there before. You know what I mean? And so what I always look at is how can I make it so that I'm always in a place where I'm multiple years ahead of the problem that's going to happen because I know it's going to happen. And if you're in that way, you know what? You might actually end up having less profit year to year, but you'll have more profit overall if you look over the 5 to 20 year span of the future, because you're not going to have these major dips that happen when you haven't innovated and you haven't mitigated the risk of, your ad account gets banned or your partner. I had one person come the other day. They're like, I did 2.4 million last year of partner, but my partner ditched me. And so far this year, I only made 200 grand. And I'm like, you're screwed. I'm like, what did you do to the money? And they're like, oh, well, I dividended. I'm like, well, listen, you're screwed. You're effectively screwed. That was a lottery ticket, but you didn't treat it that way. And so I think it's really important to mitigate the risk in a business by having, various traffic sources, various ways people can kind of come about and see you. And in doing that, over time, you make it so that you are kind of future-proofed and bulletproof inside of a business.
And there's a great thing that I learned from Dan Kennedy that served me really well. So Dan Kennedy, the godfather of direct response marketing, right? He says that a percentage of your profits always needs to be allocated to testing new media types. And it just makes sense. And he was pointing out it's never one way to get 100 customers. It's 100 ways to get one customer. And even though you're right, you get dominant ones, but you've always got to be testing. So if you're not reinvesting some of that profit, like you're guaranteed to fail, evolve or die, right? So Scott, listen, I'm loving this conversation. And right now I've got a plane to catch. I'm going to have to cut it short. I'm going to have to push pause, and the people listening to this can write in, let us know what questions, and we'll tee up a round 2. But for those that are loving this conversation, want to find out more about you and your work, where should they go? What should they do?
They can just head over to scottoldford.com, SCOTTOLDFORD. storybrand.com, and you can get everything from there. And thanks for having me. And I'm absolutely up for a part 2. Maybe we'll go into the investor advisory, private equity side of the fund, which is it's really the true way to build wealth on either ways. Once you get past that, $5 million a year place.
100%. Looking forward to it. Can't wait. Scott, thank you very much. And I'll see you again.
Excellent interview by Scott. In fact, that was so good, I'm actually a little, not a lot, but a little less butthurt that I got bumped for him. Yeah, it soothed the wound.
I was happy to bump you. I'll bump you again in future.
Honestly, it was really, you'll do it many times in the future, I hope. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about now we've already been getting, by the way, comments from people on the podcast that every time we talk about a book of the week, we end up mentioning 2 or 3 or 4 books of the week. But I'm sticking to my guns, and we're still calling it the book of the week. So let's talk about book of the week.
All right, so the book of the week this week is an absolute classic. It's Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Oh, I love that book. That's another book, by the way, that I went into reading a little bit skeptical on it. And within like the first 2 chapters, I was like, holy hell, this is so good. Like he did a great way of, a book is good when you read it and you sit there and you go, wish I would have said that. Wish I would, or like, I that's what I've been thinking or feeling, and that I just got that so many times. And the biggest key, and it was funny, before we started recording, we discussed what's the key thing, like the biggest takeaway, and we both had the exact same takeaway. So what's the biggest lesson that you got out of building your story brand?
This is so, this is definitely one of those things when you're reading, oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah.
It's about making your customer the hero in your marketing. Not you, not your business.
Or the product. I think a lot of people goes, well, but shouldn't the product be the hero? Shouldn't the product be the solution?
Yeah, because it solves the problem.
No, it's you'll make it more effective when the client becomes the hero of that story.
Right, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, let's elaborate slightly more in depth. So it's really about the hero's journey. So the whole book gives loads of great examples of the stories and scripts and uses like Star Wars and multiple movies as an example of how they take people on a journey.
Yeah.
But he said that the problem is egotistical to say your product's the hero. The customer doesn't care about your product or about your company. They care about themselves. Yeah. So they're the hero that's got the pain that needs to transform, and your company or your service or your product is the guide.
It's the catalyst.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you'll read this book. I promise you, if you sit down and read this book, here's how I know if a book's fantastic, or how my team know, because I'm literally, as I'm reading the book, I'm texting my team, we need to have a meeting, we need to change this.
I'll take pictures of the page, and I send it to my mastermind team, or I'll send it to my staff going, read this, this is amazing. By the way, just one last thing from the hero side. The best analogy I think he said in the book is that the customer is the Luke Skywalker. Right. You or your product is the Yoda.
Yoda, that's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So, phenomenal. I couldn't agree more. And by the way, that book inspired me to go further and read more about Buckminster Fuller, who's the guy who created the entire concept of, if you haven't read anything about Buckminster Fuller, he's a mythologist, and he's the one who is the inspiration behind Star Wars. In fact, interestingly enough, little historical tidbit, do you know that Yoda was when was it George Lucas created the Star Wars? He created Yoda with Buckminster Fuller.
Really? Yes. That's quite a bookie Fuller. I mean, what an absolute legend. I mean, a polymath, an inventor. Just what an absolute rock star.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So, all right. So we talked about book of the week. We talked about the hero, the fail, the news. Wrap it up, my friend. What's the quote of the week?
Yeah, the quote of the week is by Tom Fishburne that says this. Ties in nicely with the story brand, which is great marketing doesn't feel like marketing.
So true, right? That's the best way. Because, by the way, because people hate to be sold, but they love to choose to buy. And when you tell the right story, they make that choice.
Take them on in the story, entertain them. So with all that said, if you want a better business, you need to be a better business owner. See you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 steps to improving your profits and cash flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.